Imagine a life of perfection cracking under the weight of secrets. Glamorous parties, luxurious outfits, and the carefully curated image of the Nguyen family begin to collapse in a storm of betrayal and intrigue. This is a story where every move is calculated, but the outcomes are anything but predictable. When old schemes unravel and the truth surfaces, the question arises: how far will people go to preserve their power, wealth, and dignity? Between elegant manipulations and cold-blooded strategies lies a thin line where trust is no longer a currency. My dear friend, be sure to subscribe to my channel if this is your first time here, and give your royal like to this video. Scarlett Nguyen stood motionless before her grand, full-length mirror, her sharp gaze dissecting every detail of her reflection with the same precision she applied to all aspects of her life. The sleek, ebony dress she wore fit her form like a glove, a clear indicator of the countless hours spent in private Pilates sessions. At 48, she remained a striking presence, a fact she both embraced and wielded with precision. Her lips, painted in a bold crimson, quirked upward slightly as she fastened an extravagant diamond bracelet around her wrist, one of many opulent gifts from Brandon during their 23-year marriage. "Mom, are you decent?" Amara's voice called from beyond the partially ajar bedroom door. "Come in, sweetheart," Scarlett replied, smoothing her meticulously arranged waves over her shoulders. The door creaked open, revealing Amara's figure framed in the doorway. In the mirror's reflection, her daughter stood like a younger, sharper-edged version of Scarlett herself, all striking angles and unyielding poise. Pride mingled with unease as Scarlett noted the calculated sharpness in Amara's demeanor. "Off to charm someone tonight?" Amara teased, flopping onto the expansive bed with a sly grin. Her thumbs danced over her phone screen, the device seemingly fused to her hand as she scrolled through an endless stream of social media. Scarlett turned to face her, her expression carefully neutral. "Just a dinner with friends," she said, her voice smooth. Amara's brow arched. "The same friends you've seen 3 times this week?" She paused dramatically. "Oh, and by the way, Dad's working late again. He called to say he'll be stuck at the office for hours." Scarlett's lips pressed into a thin line, her tone cooling. "Of course he is. The firm couldn't possibly survive without him." She reached for a perfume bottle she rarely used, its scent bold and uncharacteristically daring. "Your father has been practically married to his job these days." Amara's grin widened. "You could just tell him, about Michael. Or is it David this week?" Scarlett froze mid-spray. "I'm not sure I follow," she said coolly. "Please," Amara said, rolling her eyes with the nonchalance of someone far older than her 18 years. "I've seen the texts on your phone when you leave it lying around. The names, the late-night outings, the new scents. Honestly, I'm impressed. You're smoother than most of my friends' moms who've tried the same thing." For a moment, their eyes met in the mirror, a silent clash of intellect and will. Finally, Scarlett sighed and turned fully to face her daughter. "And what do you want from me, Amara? A lecture on fidelity? A moral high ground?" Amara's laughter filled the room, rich and self-assured. "God, no. I want you to be happy. Dad's been emotionally checked out for years, treating this house like a layover between client meetings. You deserve better." A surprising warmth swelled within Scarlett, not guilt or shame, but a quiet sense of validation. "You're far too grown up sometimes," she said softly. "I learned from the best," Amara replied with a knowing smirk, stepping forward to adjust her mother's necklace. "So, who is it tonight? The architect? The gallery owner?" "Neither," Scarlett said, allowing a genuine smile to surface. "Someone new, a client of your father's, younger, attentive." "Does he know you're married?" "They always do," Scarlett replied with ease, touching up her lipstick. "I'm not looking to replace your father, darling. I just want more. Is that so terrible?" "Not to me," Amara said, her sharp smile mirroring her mother's. "But maybe it's time to stop sneaking around. Tell Dad what you want, what you need. He's not totally unreasonable." Scarlett studied their reflections, a flicker of consideration crossing her face. "You think he'd understand? Mr. Traditional Values himself?" "He'd rather negotiate than lose you entirely," Amara said with a shrug. And if he doesn't? That's what prenups are for, right? Scarlett's laughter rang out, light and unguarded. She picked up her clutch, ensuring its contents were in order, credit cards all linked to Brandon's accounts, naturally. Don't wait up, darling. If your father asks, I'm at book club. Amara didn't look up from her phone. Go. Enjoy yourself. You've earned it. Across the city, Brandon Nguyen stood in his towering office, staring out at the glimmering skyline as dusk gave way to night. Behind him, his laptop's screen glowed coldly, filled with spreadsheets and contracts awaiting his review. Yet his thoughts were elsewhere. His gaze fell to a photograph on his desk, the three of them at their 20th anniversary celebration. Scarlett had beamed at the camera, champagne flute in hand, while Amara stood between them, their perfect smiles hiding the fractures beneath the surface. His jaw tightened as Maria's earlier message replayed in his mind. Mrs. Nguyen left dressed for evening. Very nice dress. New perfume. Maria, their housekeeper of over 15 years, never shared opinions, only observations. Her discretion was something Brandon valued, even as her notes chipped away at the illusion of his marriage. His phone vibrated with a client's urgent query. Relieved by the distraction, Brandon plunged into work, resolving others' crises while his own life unraveled. Hours slipped away in a blur of emails and calls. By the time he shut his laptop, the office was eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of a vacuum. The drive home felt interminable. Each mile seemed heavier, burdened with memories and unanswered questions. He had noticed the signs for months: Scarlett's late nights, unfamiliar fragrances, and her newly extravagant wardrobe. He'd watched her drift further away, just as Amara had grown colder, her sharp wit aimed at both parents. Pulling into the circular driveway, Brandon noted Scarlett's Mercedes in its usual spot. The house loomed before him, its sleek modern design a stark contrast to the emotional void within. As he stepped inside, the faint clink of glass against granite reached his ears. Loosening his tie, he followed the sound toward the kitchen. The scent hit him first, a blend of Scarlett's new perfume and an unfamiliar cologne. His stomach twisted. Setting his briefcase down carefully, he listened as the grandfather clock struck midnight, each chime echoing through the house like a countdown. "Waiting for you, darling," Scarlett's voice called from the kitchen, slightly slurred yet composed. Brandon squared his shoulders and stepped forward. After 23 years, the moment of reckoning had arrived. The only question was, how much would change? Prepared wasn't quite the word. After 23 years of dutifully playing the perfect wife, the attentive mother, and the gracious hostess at an endless parade of corporate events, Scarlett was done. A bold heat coursed through her, the wine emboldening her to shed years of carefully maintained decorum. Amara appeared in the doorway, barefoot and clad in designer sleepwear, her face bathed in the cold glow of her phone screen. Her manicured fingers held it aloft like a weapon. "Didn't bother showering, huh?" she quipped, her lips curling into a knowing smirk. "Still reeks of cologne." "Perfect," Scarlett replied, finishing the last of her wine in one decisive gulp. The pretense was over. No more pretending, no more masks. "You're really going to go through with this?" Amara asked, as she climbed onto a bar stool at the kitchen island, her legs swinging idly. "The whole open marriage thing?" "It's not his choice," Scarlett said, her voice firm but softened by the wine. "He can agree or—" The sound of the front door opening interrupted her. A heavy thud followed as Brandon dropped his briefcase, his steps deliberate as he entered. Amara, ever quick to adjust, tilted her phone slightly, pretending to scroll as she discreetly angled the camera toward her parents. "Still awake?" Brandon's tired voice echoed from the entryway. Scarlett turned, leaning casually against the counter, the curve of her silhouette accentuated by the sleek black dress she wore. "Waiting for you, darling," she said smoothly. "How was work? Another riveting board meeting?" The faintest twitch of Brandon's jaw betrayed him as he caught the scent of unfamiliar cologne. His eyes narrowed. "Where were you tonight?" "Out," Scarlett said with nonchalance, holding up her empty glass. "Dinner, dancing, living a little. You remember what that feels like, don't you? Or has it been too long? Whose cologne is that? His voice dipped low, each word laced with tension. Amara, perched nearby, couldn't resist the scene unfolding before her, her fingers darting over her phone screen. She'd seen this moment coming for months and had nudged it along in subtle ways, a hint here, a word there. Does it matter? Scarlett set the glass down deliberately, the sound punctuating her defiance. What matters is that I had fun. Real fun. When was the last time we did that, Brandon? You're drunk, he said, turning away to loosen his tie. We'll discuss this when you're sober. No! Her voice sliced through the room, sharp and unwavering. We're talking now. I'm done pretending, Brandon. Done sneaking around, done living a half-life while you bury yourself in work and act like we're fine. Amara shifted, angling her camera carefully. This was better than any scripted drama, and more than entertainment, it was evidence, a weapon she intended to wield when the moment was right. What's going on? She asked, feigning innocence with just the right note of concern. I heard raised voices. Brandon's gaze darted to her. Your mother's been out, he said tersely. Maybe she'd like to explain why she smells like another man's cologne. Amara's tone turned dry. Finally, she didn't bother hiding her satisfaction. This was the culmination of her quiet efforts, cracks forming in the pristine facade of their family. Brandon's head snapped toward her. What do you mean, finally? Come on, Dad. She rolled her eyes with the practiced disdain of a teenager. Mom's been miserable for years. At least she's doing something about it instead of pretending everything's fine while you're married to your job. His jaw tightened, his hands clenching at his sides. Don't start, Amara, he warned, his voice low. Scarlett cut in. No, let her speak. She stepped beside Amara, the two of them standing united, an alliance that would infuriate him. She sees it, Brandon. She's seen it for years. We're not happy. This isn't working. The harsh kitchen light cast stark shadows across Brandon's face as he stared at them. His wife and daughter, so alike in their beauty and sharpness, now aligned against him. So your solution is to cheat? He snapped, his voice rising. Throw away 23 years of marriage? Scarlett stood taller, her chin lifted. My solution is honesty. I want an open marriage, Brandon. Amara's eyes glittered with interest. They had rehearsed this moment, choosing each word for maximum impact. Brandon's voice dropped to a low monotone. An open marriage? Yes, Scarlett said with growing confidence. We can both see other people. No emotional entanglements, just physical connections to fill what's missing. You can do it too. Find someone who makes you feel alive again. This is madness, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. You're standing here reeking of another man telling me we should just forget our vows? They're just words, Dad, Amara said coolly. People change. Relationships change. Brandon's voice thundered. This house, this life I've built for us, it's all a prison? Even golden bars are still bars, Scarlett said softly, reaching again for her glass. I'm not asking for permission, Brandon. I'm telling you how it's going to be. You can either accept it and move forward with me, or... Her words hung in the charged silence, the unspoken ultimatum lingering in the air. Amara watched her father closely, noting every flicker of his expression as anger and disbelief fought for dominance. This was the chaos she'd foreseen, planned for. Because in this chaos lay opportunity. The stillness in the kitchen was stifling, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft drip of the faucet. 3 lives stood at a precipice, their fragile equilibrium shattered. Somewhere a clock chimed the hour, marking the countdown to an inevitable unraveling. Brandon stepped closer, his voice a whisper that cut like steel. Or what? He studied her, his gaze piercing. You'll leave? Take half of everything I've worked for? Is that your threat? Scarlett's voice didn't waver. It's not a threat. Her voice was steady, deliberate. The choice is yours. We can be honest with each other and allow ourselves the space we need, or we can end this altogether. But I refuse to go back to living a lie. Mom's right, Amar chimed in, her phone poised to record every second of the tense conversation. She moved closer to her mother until their shoulders nearly brushed. You're being unreasonable, Dad. This could actually work for both of you. You're always talking about innovation in your business, she added. Why not bring some of that innovation into your marriage? Brandon let out a short, bitter laugh. Innovation? He gestured toward the pristine marble countertops and the state-of-the-art appliances he'd installed to cater to Scarlett's tastes. Is that what we're calling betrayal now? Progress? Modern thinking? His gaze darkened as it landed on Amar's phone. Turn that thing off. This isn't some reality TV episode you can stream for laughs. I'm documenting, Amar replied coolly, refusing to lower her phone. In case things get out of hand, you're clearly upset, Dad. Maybe we should all take a breath. Upset? Brandon's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. You think this is anger? No, Amar. This is disgust, disappointment. Watching you two treat the destruction of this family like some strategic game. It's revolting. No one's destroying anything, Scarlett said, reaching for the wine bottle on the counter. Brandon's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist before she could pour another glass. No more wine. If we're having this conversation, we're doing it sober. Let her go, Amar demanded, stepping forward, but Scarlett motioned for her to stay back. It's fine, sweetheart. Scarlett wrenched her wrist free, rubbing it as if his grip had left a mark. Your father's just showing his true nature, the controlling man behind the polished attorney facade. She turned her gaze on Brandon, her eyes sharp. This is exactly why I sought solace elsewhere. Solace. Brandon spat the word as though it tasted foul. That's what you call it? Destroying our marriage? Teaching our daughter that commitments mean nothing? Solace? Oh, please spare us the moral high ground, Amar cut in, rolling her eyes. At least Mom is honest about her needs. She's not pretending like everything's perfect while hiding behind work. Brandon turned to Amar, studying her with a disconcerting intensity. When had she become this person? So calculated, so unflinching. And what about you, Amar? What's your stake in this? My stake? Amar blinked, briefly losing her composure. Yes, your stake. He stepped closer, watching her retreat despite her outward confidence. You always have one, don't you? Straight A's by charming your teachers, scholarships by spinning heartfelt stories, bills I pay without question because you've mastered the art of asking at just the right time. That's not fair, Dad. Don't lie to me. Not tonight. His voice cut like a whip. You've learned well from your mother. The manipulation, the scheming, the strategy. So tell me, Amar, what do you gain from this? Encouraging her behavior? What's your endgame? Stop attacking her. Scarlett staggered between them, her movements unsteady. She's only trying to help us find a way forward. A way forward? Brandon let out a hollow laugh. Here's what I see. A wife who reeks of another man's cologne, asking for permission to continue her infidelity instead of making a choice between fidelity and divorce. A daughter, filming the whole thing, probably to use against me later. And me, a fool who gave 23 years to a liar and a fraud. Scarlett's hand shot up as though to slap him, but Brandon caught her wrist midair. No, he said, his tone chillingly calm. You don't get to play the victim. You made your choice when you cheated. You made your choice when you walked in here tonight, flaunting your betrayal. Let me go, Scarlett whispered, her defiance faltering, not from fear of harm but from something in his expression, something cold and unyielding. Gladly. He dropped her wrist and stepped back. You want honesty? Here it is. I will never tolerate infidelity. I will never agree to an open marriage, and I will never forget what you've done tonight. He turned his gaze to both of them, as if etching this moment into his memory. Dad, don't, Amar said, her confidence breaking as uncertainty crept into her voice. Think this through. Sleep on it. Consider what Mom's offering. Offering? He scoffed. She's offering destruction, dressed up in pretty words. And you? You're worse, encouraging her betrayal, enabling it, probably planning to benefit from it. I expected better from you, Amar. Maybe that's on me. You don't mean that, Amar said quickly, lowering her phone slightly as cracks began to show in her resolve. I mean every word. Adjusting his tie with a disconcerting calm, Brandon delivered his verdict. This marriage is over. Not because you want an open arrangement, Scarlett, Not because you cheated, but because tonight, you've both shown me exactly who you are, and I want no part of it. Scarlett's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. The crimson liquid spread across the white surface like blood. You can't just— I can. And I will. Brandon carefully stepped over the shards. You'll hear from my lawyer tomorrow. Start looking for somewhere else to stay. This is my house too! Scarlett's voice rose, panic replacing her earlier bravado. You can't throw us out! Oh, but I can. He paused in the doorway, his tone razor sharp. Check the deed. Look at the prenup you were too drunk to read at the engagement party. Review the papers you signed over the years without a second thought, trusting me with the boring legal stuff. His smile was cold, devoid of warmth. You talk about being trapped? Try living without the accounts you've been draining for years. Amara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension with unwavering determination. Dad, enough! The facade of composure she'd held onto so tightly finally fractured. We understand you're upset, but this isn't the solution. The solution to what? Brandon interrupted, his tone icy and unforgiving. To preserving everything I've worked for? To protecting myself from the manipulations you two have been orchestrating? His eyes blazed with an intensity that silenced the room. He shook his head deliberately, as if dismissing an invisible weight. Watch me, he said coldly. Brandon, please. Scarlett's voice wavered, her composure slipping away entirely. We can fix this. We can have a civil discussion. No, he snapped, his tone slicing through her words like a knife. You meant every decision you made, every lie you told, every betrayal you committed. Now you'll understand the cost of those choices. Without another word, he turned and strode out of the kitchen, leaving shattered glass and a pool of spilled wine in his wake. Behind him, Scarlett's desperate pleas and Amara's futile attempts to reason followed him like a fading echo. He didn't glance back. In the quiet sanctuary of the master bedroom, Brandon perched on the edge of the bed, his movements deliberate as he picked up his phone. A few swift messages to his personal attorney, not the firm's lawyers who might waver in their loyalties, set his plan into motion. Accounts were frozen. Documents were prepared. Downstairs, their panicked voices ebbed and flowed, muffled through the floorboards like distant static. Let them scheme, Brandon thought, his jaw clenched with steely resolve. He'd spent 23 years building this life, this empire, and he wouldn't watch it disintegrate now. The grandfather clock's chime broke the silence, marking 1 o'clock with resonant finality. By morning, everything would be different. For now, he remained in the shadows, the weight of betrayal fueling his determination. No more forgiveness, no more chances. They had made their moves, and now they'd face someone with nothing left to lose. Downstairs, moonlight streamed through the mansion's grand windows, casting elongated shadows across the marble floor and darkened wine stains. Scarlett slumped over the kitchen island, her polished exterior entirely gone. Her trembling hands swiped at her phone's banking apps, each attempt met with the same unyielding response. Access denied. He can't do this, she whispered, her voice raw from hours of arguing. Legally, he can't just cut us off like this. Amara paced back and forth, her phone pressed tightly against her ear. The accounts are joint, she insisted to the bank representative, her tone wavering between firm and pleading. There has to be some sort of mistake. Upstairs, the sound of drawers opening and slamming shut punctuated the tense silence. Brandon's presence loomed over them like an unseen specter. Call Michael, Amara suggested, tossing her phone onto the counter in frustration when the hold music continued endlessly. He's Dad's client. Maybe he can talk him down. Scarlett let out a bitter laugh. And say what? Hi, lover. My husband knows about us. Can you help? Her hand instinctively reached for the wine bottle before she remembered it lay shattered on the floor. Then call the firm, Amara said desperately. Someone there has to be able to help. Help you with what? Brandon's voice cut through the room like a razor. They turned to find him standing in the doorway, impeccably dressed, a briefcase in one hand and a thick envelope in the other. Who do you think has the authority to override my decisions regarding my assets? Scarlett pushed herself to her feet, her movements unsteady, exhaustion written across her face. "Brandon, please. Let's be reasonable. Last night got heated, but..." "But what?" He placed the envelope on the counter with a deliberate gesture, sliding it toward them. "But you didn't mean for me to find out? But you assumed I'd turn a blind eye to your betrayal? But you overestimated your position in this marriage?" Amara stepped forward, her voice soft but calculated. "Dad, we get that you're hurt, but freezing the accounts? Cutting us off completely? That's going too far." Brandon laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Too far?" he repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "Too far was seeing my wife return home smelling like another man's cologne. Too far was watching my daughter cover for her mother's infidelity. This," he tapped the envelope pointedly, "is just business." Scarlett's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, her face draining of color as she flipped through its contents. "Divorce papers?" she whispered. "How? When?" "You thought last night was the first time I knew?" Brandon adjusted his tie with meticulous precision. "Maria's been keeping me updated for months. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Amara's voice rose, her indignation sharp. "You were spying on us?" "I was protecting myself," he replied evenly. "A lesson I learned from you. Always stay 3 steps ahead. Always know your position before you make a move." Scarlett's voice shook as she leafed through the documents. "The house, the accounts, it's all in your name?" "Check the dates on those transfers," Brandon said calmly. "You signed them yourself. Tax strategies, estate planning, all legitimate, all finalized months ago." Amara's voice fell to a whisper. "You've been preparing this for months." "Yes," Brandon confirmed, glancing at his watch. "For about as long as your mother's been involved with her discretion. Though I doubt either of you were as subtle as you thought." Scarlett's expression hardened, her defiance reigniting. "I'll fight this. I'll get my own lawyer." "With what?" Brandon asked coolly. "Money you don't control? Assets you no longer own? Check your accounts, Scarlett. Everything you had came from me, and now it's gone." Amara's composure shattered. "What are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go?" Brandon shrugged, utterly detached. "Not my concern anymore." He gestured toward the envelope. "There's a modest apartment arranged for you both. 2 bedrooms, rent covered until the end of the month. After that..." He picked up his briefcase and headed toward the door. "I suggest you find work." Scarlett let out a laugh edged with hysteria. "I haven't worked in 20 years. What am I supposed to do?" Brandon paused, his expression indifferent. "Once again, not my problem." As he reached for the door, he paused, fingers still resting on the handle. "Oh, and Amara," he began, his voice carrying an undertone of quiet menace. "You might want to revisit those college applications. There seems to be a discrepancy with the financial information submitted. The schools you applied to, they'll be getting the corrected figures soon enough." His words hit like a slap, draining the color from Amara's face. "Dad, please. My future..." "Your future," he interrupted icily, "is the product of your decisions. You chose your path, Amara. You played your part in tearing this family apart, and now you'll face the fallout." His voice was devoid of emotion as he turned and exited, his footsteps reverberating on the cold marble floors. Moments later, the sound of the front door closing echoed through the house, final and unyielding. From the kitchen window, they watched his car disappear down the driveway. Scarlett, leaning against the counter, let the divorce papers slip from her unsteady hands. "This can't be real," she murmured, her voice hollow. "It's not happening." Amara stooped to pick up the scattered documents, her hands trembling as she leafed through them. Her expression hardened with each page. No credit cards, no shopping trips, no private school, no college fund. Each realization struck her like a separate blow. "Mom," she said, her voice shaking, "what are we going to do?" Scarlett offered no response. Her gaze remained fixed on her reflection in the darkened window. The streaked mascara on her cheeks, her disheveled hair, and the designer dress she wore all seemed to mock her, a cruel reminder of the life she'd built on superficial pursuits. The soft morning light crept in, accentuating every wrinkle and shadow on her face, evidence of years spent prioritizing appearance over substance. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 7, its chimes cutting through the silence of the house. Across town, in his office, Brandon would already be at work, unraveling the life they had once taken for granted. Overnight, their world of privilege had crumbled, leaving them amid the wreckage of broken dreams and unfulfilled promises. They had believed they could manipulate betrayal to their benefit. Now, they were forced to face its unyielding price, not only in lost wealth, but in unavoidable, painful consequences. The apartment Brandon had arranged for them was on the 3rd floor of an unremarkable building in a less desirable part of town. There were no doormen, no secure parking, no marble countertops. Scarlett stood by the window, watching neighbors shuffle to their cars. Her manicured nails tapped against the cheap laminate windowsill. "I can't believe he's making us live here," she muttered, bitterness dripping from her words. Amara emerged from one of the cramped bedrooms, her hair brushed and her expression set. "Did you call the bank yet?" "Better," Amara replied with a sly smile as she perched on the arm of their second-hand couch. "Grayson's coming over." Scarlett raised an eyebrow. "Your boyfriend? Why?" Amara's smile widened, a sharp gleam in her eyes. "While you've been sulking, I've been strategizing." Her fingers danced across her phone screen. "Dad's furious, but he's also pragmatic. He won't risk a public scandal, especially one that could tarnish his firm's reputation." Scarlett's brow furrowed. "What exactly are you planning?" "Leverage," Amara said simply. "And Grayson? He's perfect for that." Before Scarlett could probe further, a knock at the door interrupted them. Amara sprang up to answer, her demeanor shifting instantly as she opened the door. Grayson Miller stepped inside, his athletic frame and polished demeanor exuding confidence. His sharp eyes swept over the apartment, and his nose wrinkled slightly in distaste. "This place is different," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I told you," Amara said with a pout, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Daddy's being impossible. But you'll help us, won't you? Just like we talked about." Scarlett observed their exchange, her interest piqued by the subtle power dynamics. Grayson nodded politely in Scarlett's direction. "Amara filled me in. It's a harsh situation. What your husband's doing. Completely unwarranted." "Call me Scarlett," she said, stepping closer. Grayson's gaze flicked toward her, betraying a mix of admiration and calculation. Despite the modest surroundings, Scarlett's appearance remained impeccable, a shield she refused to discard. And yes, Brandon's actions have been extreme. "Cruel," Amara interjected. "He's sabotaging my future, cutting us off completely. No support, no tuition. I don't know how we'll manage." "That's why I'm here," Grayson said smoothly, his smile calculated yet reassuring. "To help, however I can." Amara cast her mother a meaningful look. "Grayson thinks we've been too passive about this. Isn't that right, babe?" Grayson nodded, settling onto the couch. "Your father's playing hardball. Maybe it's time you did the same." Scarlett sank into the worn armchair opposite him, her curiosity deepening. "And what do you suggest?" Amara's voice dropped to a conspiratorial tone. "Mom, don't you think Grayson is exactly the type of guy Dad would consider a promising candidate? You know, if Dad were scouting for fresh talent at the firm?" Understanding dawned on Scarlett. She studied Grayson more closely, his tailored attire, his polished image, his acute awareness of their scrutiny. "You're in law school, aren't you?" "Top of my class," Grayson replied, his grin widening. "Corporate law is my focus." "Brandon's firm prides itself on traditional values," Scarlett mused aloud, catching on to Amara's line of thought. "Exactly," Amara said eagerly. "Imagine the damage if rumors started about a senior partner, inappropriate behavior with a prospective hire, for instance." "That could destroy his reputation," Grayson agreed, his tone measured. "Even baseless rumors can be devastating in this industry." Scarlett felt a smile tug at her lips. "You've clearly put a lot of thought into this." Amara beamed. "I learned from the best, and honestly, Mom, after everything Dad's done to you, you deserve some fun. Right, Grayson?" Grayson's gaze shifted between the two women, a blend of ambition and calculation in his eyes. "I'm here to help," he said. "Whatever it takes." Amara's voice dripped with feigned innocence. "This benefits everyone. Dad backs down, restores our accounts, and no one's reputation gets tarnished." Scarlett poured herself a glass of wine. The cheap bottle mocked her, but she drank anyway. "You're treading dangerous ground, Amara." Her daughter's eyes sharpened. "No more dangerous than what Dad's doing. He thinks he can abandon us, leave us to rot in this dump. He needs to understand we're not powerless." Scarlett turned to Grayson, scrutinizing him. "And you're fine with this? Using your skills for this kind of strategy?" Grayson's laugh was unexpected, genuine enough to disarm her momentarily. "Scarlett, let's not pretend. I'm a law student with ambition. This is just another game, and I'm very good at winning. Your husband's law firm is hailed as the pinnacle of corporate legal prestige in the state." "One way or another, I'm getting in," Amara declared, her fingers gliding idly along his arm. "This just speeds things up and sweetens the deal," she added with a sly smile. "It's a win-win for everyone." Scarlett swirled her wine thoughtfully, taking a measured sip as she considered the bold scheme. It was audacious, risky, and exactly the kind of maneuver they needed. But something about Grayson's impeccably poised manner, paired with the meticulous precision of Amara's plan, left Scarlett uneasy. Who was really steering this ship? "We'll have to be careful," she said at last. "Brandon isn't stupid. He'll be waiting for a misstep to use against us." "Let him wait," Amara replied, her smile sharp and dangerous. "Exactly," Grayson added smoothly. "Give him something he can't resist documenting. Evidence cuts both ways." Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, its harsh light falling on the crumbling facade of their apartment building. Inside, shrouded in shadows and the residue of their fallen circumstances, a dangerous plot began to take root. It was fueled by ambition and desperation, manipulation and vengeance. Scarlett glanced at her daughter and saw the same ruthless determination she had once wielded. Pride mingled uneasily with fear. They were playing with fire, and someone was bound to get burned. The question was who. The next day, Grayson lounged on their worn sofa, his expensive loafers propped carelessly on the battered coffee table. Amara sat beside him, cross-legged, her hand resting deliberately on his thigh. From the kitchen, Scarlett observed the scene as she brewed coffee in their cheap, recently acquired machine. Her eyes lingered on Grayson's watchful gaze following her movements, and Amara's fingers lingering too long on his leg. "Walk me through the plan again," Scarlett said, carrying 2 mugs to the living room. She perched on the arm of the faded chair, her confidence bolstered by a carefully chosen outfit, salvaged from her once pristine wardrobe. "It's simple," Amara replied, taking the cup with a knowing smirk. "Grayson shows up regularly, enough for people to notice. Rumors start at the firm about Brandon's promising hire getting too close to his daughter," Scarlett countered, raising an eyebrow. "That'll blow up in our faces." "Not about me," Amara corrected, her eyes sparkling. "About you." Grayson leaned back, draping an arm casually over the sofa as he elaborated. "The gossip needs to be specific, plausible. A senior partner exploiting his position, dangling a job in front of a law student while having an affair with the student's mother, and dragging his own family into ruin along the way." "It's flawless," Amara added triumphantly. "Dad's reputation will be in shreds." "And when Brandon denies it?" Scarlett challenged, setting her mug down. "What's stopping him from claiming we're blackmailing him?" Grayson's smile turned predatory. "That's where the evidence comes in. Photos, videos, nothing explicit, just suggestive. Late-night visits, you dressed provocatively, Amara conveniently absent." Scarlett's eyes narrowed. "And you're willing to gamble your career for this? Why?" Grayson straightened, his casual air vanishing. "Because I understand power. Your husband's firm doesn't just lead, it makes careers. The traditional route could take years. This way I either climb the ladder or leave with a fat settlement. Either way, I win." "We win," Amara corrected, shooting him a pointed look. "Right, babe?" "Of course," Grayson replied, but his focus remained on Scarlett. Everyone gets what they want. A knock at the door brought the conversation to an abrupt halt. Amara sprang up, checking the peephole. "It's Maria," she whispered. "Dad's housekeeper." Grayson's grin widened. "Perfect. Let her in." Scarlett quickly pieced it together. Maria, Brandon's longtime employee, had acted as his informant during the collapse of their marriage. Whatever she saw now would certainly reach him. Feigning surprise, Amara opened the door. "Maria, what brings you here?" The older woman stood awkwardly with a box in her hands. "Mr. Nguyen asked me to deliver these. Papers, jewelry." Her eyes scanned the room, taking in Grayson on the couch, Scarlett's revealing outfit, and the charged atmosphere. "How thoughtful of him," Scarlett purred, accepting the box. "Please come in. We were just having coffee with Amara's friend." "I shouldn't," Maria began, but Grayson rose to block the doorway, his smile warm yet insistent. "Just for a moment," he urged. "I'd love to hear about your experience working for Brandon. I'm hoping to join his firm." Maria hesitated, her unease plain as she stepped inside. She perched on the edge of a chair, gripping the coffee cup offered to her as though it might steady her. "Mr. Nguyen wouldn't approve," she began. "Brandon doesn't decide who we see anymore," Scarlett interjected smoothly. "But do let him know we're doing well, making new friends." "Very good friends," Grayson added, brushing his hand lightly against Scarlett's waist as he passed her. The subtle gesture made Maria jump to her feet, spilling her coffee in the process. "I really should go," she stammered. "Of course," Amara said, ushering her to the door. Once it closed, she turned back, her expression victorious. "That went perfectly." "Don't get ahead of yourself," Scarlett warned, watching Maria hurry to her car. "This is only the beginning." "And we're already ahead," Amara countered, holding up her phone to reveal a string of messages. "I've invited some of Dad's junior associates to a party here next weekend, a casual gathering, perfect for networking and fueling the gossip." Grayson nodded approvingly. "You're a natural." "I had a great teacher," Amara said, flashing a proud smile at Scarlett. But beneath Scarlett's pride, a flicker of unease took root. "And your boyfriend?" Scarlett asked suddenly. "The real one. Won't he mind all this? Networking?" Amara laughed, waving the question away. "Mom, this isn't about relationships. It's about power, getting what we want." Sliding onto Grayson's lap, she toyed with his tie. "And what we want is for Dad to pay for what he's done to us." Grayson's hands rested on Amara's hips as he added, "Who says I'm not the real boyfriend? People can want more than one thing at a time, can't they, Scarlett?" The way he said her name sent a chill down her spine. His calculating gaze mirrored the darkest parts of herself. "Just remember," she said carefully, "this only works if we control the story. A single miscalculation, a moment of vulnerability before the wrong people, that's all it would take to unravel everything." "Relax," Scarlett said, her practiced smile concealing a steely resolve. "I have it all under control. By the time your husband figures out what's happening, it'll be too late. He'll have no choice but to comply with your demands just to salvage his precious reputation." "Our demands," Amara corrected, her voice barely above a whisper, though it trembled slightly. Outside, the sky darkened, heavy clouds threatening rain as they loomed over their modest apartment. Scarlett's eyes drifted to her daughter, wrapped in the arms of a striking law student whose hands lingered possessively on her waist, while his gaze occasionally flickered toward Scarlett herself. They were all playing with fire, each with their own motives, each dancing on a knife's edge. Meanwhile, across town, Brandon sat ensconced in his lofty office, high above the city's chaos, when his housekeeper called with unsettling news about a scene unfolding in their new apartment. A bold young law student entangled with both women of the Nguyen family. The chessboard was set, but Scarlett couldn't shake the nagging feeling that theirs wasn't the only game in motion. In their cramped apartment, soft music played, loud enough to mask whispered conversations, but quiet enough to avoid disturbing the neighbors. Scarlett mingled with Brandon's junior colleagues, her composure flawless despite the limited space. Every detail of the gathering, the arrangement of the furniture, the rhythm of the dialogue, was meticulously designed to create moments for discreet negotiations. It's just so difficult, Scarlett confided to Bradley Peters, a younger partner at Brandon's firm. Her hand briefly brushed his arm as she refilled his glass. To be abandoned like this after 23 years? That does seem extreme, Bradley replied, his eyes following her every movement, especially with Amara's education at stake. Exactly, Scarlett murmured, leaning closer. And now Brandon's using his influence to blacklist anyone who tries to help us. Can you believe that kind of vindictiveness? On the other side of the room, Amara commanded attention with an outfit that walked the fine line between elegance and allure. Grayson, her law student boyfriend, stood beside her, one hand resting possessively on her back as he animatedly discussed corporate law with the associates. Mr. Nguyen's firm has always been my goal, he declared, his voice brimming with determination. The integrity, the legacy, the dedication to excellence. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove I belong. James Wilson, a senior associate, arched a skeptical brow. Whatever it takes can be a dangerous promise in this industry. Grayson's smile turned sharp. Success isn't just about grades. It's about understanding the rules and knowing when to break them. Speaking of success, Amara interjected smoothly. Mom, didn't you want to show Grayson that article about Dad's latest case? It's in your room. Scarlett met her daughter's pointed look and nodded. Of course. Grayson, would you mind? It's quite an interesting read. Grayson followed Scarlett to the bedroom, leaving Amara to hold the attention of their guests. Scarlett made sure the door remained slightly ajar, just enough to spark curiosity. Your daughter is a natural strategist, Grayson remarked, as Scarlett pretended to search for a non-existent article. She must get it from you. Is that flattery? Scarlett asked, glancing over her shoulder. Do they teach that in law school now? They teach us to spot opportunities, exploit them, and know when we're holding the reins, he replied, stepping closer. Are you in control now? She asked, turning to face him. I think we all are, as long as we play it right, he said quietly. Your husband's colleagues are out there wondering what's happening in here. They'll form their own conclusions and spread them without any help from us. Laughter from the living room punctuated his words, followed by softer voices and a slower, more intimate song. Scarlett's eyes narrowed. You're playing a dangerous game. No more than you and Amara are, he countered, reaching out to brush her cheek. Does it bother you, using your daughter, using me? Does it bother you? She shot back. Letting yourself be used? Grayson chuckled darkly. Who says I'm the one being used? Maybe I'm exactly where I want to be, caught between a desperate mother and her calculating daughter, both ready to destroy your husband. Scarlett's pulse quickened. If you're so clever, why are you here? Because I love a good game, he whispered, his breath grazing her ear. And this one will make my career, no matter how it ends. A creak in the hallway signaled Amara's approach, ensuring the scene would be overheard. Grayson's hand slid deliberately to Scarlett's waist, a move designed to feed curiosity. What now? Scarlett whispered. Now? Grayson's sly smile returned. We let them see what they want to see. Enough to force Brandon's hand. If he doesn't fold, we'll stop bluffing. Scarlett hesitated. And if he calls our bluff? Then we push all our chips in. Amara's ready with her phone. One damning photo, a few well-placed rumors. His reputation will be in shreds. The firm won't stand by him. You've thought of everything, Scarlett said. Almost, he replied, his gaze searching hers. The real question is, are you ready to go all the way? This isn't the kind of plan you can back out of halfway. Before Scarlett could respond, Amara's voice cut through the moment. Mom, is everything okay in there? Grayson straightened, adjusting his tie. Shall we give them something to speculate about? Scarlett opened the door, her thoughts racing. They were all committed now. The pieces were in motion, the narrative already spinning through whispered conversations and speculative glances. But as she stepped back into the room with Grayson, her eyes caught Amara's expression. For an instant, something unrecognizable flickered in her daughter's gaze. Hesitation, fear, or maybe something even darker. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. replaced by her practiced smile as she directed attention where it needed to be. The party carried on, drinks flowing and conversations growing looser. Beneath the surface, however, every interaction was charged with manipulation. By the next day, whispers would circulate, salacious rumors of a wife, her daughter, an ambitious law student, and an open door. The trap had been set. The plot was advancing rapidly, and across the city, Brandon Nguyen was on the brink of discovering just how far his wife and daughter would go to ruin him. At the firm, whispers of scandal had escalated into a frenzy of speculation. Scarlett could feel the undercurrent of rumors spreading like wildfire through hushed conversations and furtive glances. Each of Grayson's increasingly frequent visits to their apartment brought their plan closer to fruition. "The break room's buzzing," Grayson remarked, sprawled out on their couch with his usual nonchalant demeanor. "The senior partners are scrambling to suppress it, but you know how these things go. A juicy rumor about the founding partner's wife and some ambitious newcomer? It's irresistible." Amara paced the tiny living room, her agitation palpable. "What about Dad? Has he heard?" Grayson's smile sharpened. "Oh, he knows. Your buddy James made sure of that. Dropped some concerned hints about inappropriate conduct and possible scandals. Apparently your dad went pale as a ghost." "Good," Amara said, halting mid-step to face her mother. "You know what comes next." Scarlett set her wineglass down deliberately, her gaze locked on her daughter. "We've discussed this, Amara." "I'm serious," Amara insisted. "The rumors aren't enough. We need irrefutable proof, something Dad can't deny or explain away." Grayson leaned forward, his tone smooth as silk. "She's right. Gossip alone doesn't cut it. Evidence? That's the clincher." Scarlett's eyes narrowed. "And your suggestion is what, exactly? That we fabricate this evidence? Stage compromising photos?" "Mom!" Amara snapped, frustration creeping into her voice. "We've gone over this. It doesn't have to be explicit. Just suggestive enough to corner Dad, destroy his reputation." Grayson's fingers lightly brushed Scarlett's cheek, his touch as calculated as his words. "Picture it. One carefully staged afternoon. A few incriminating photos, and Brandon won't have a leg to stand on. The house, the money, Amara's college fund. It'll all be yours." Scarlett's voice was ice. "And what's your cut in all this?" Grayson's grin widened, dripping with triumph. "A partnership at the best firm in the state, or a hefty payout to keep my silence. Either way, I win." "We all win," Amara added, though her voice wavered slightly, betraying her uncertainty. Scarlett's sharp eyes caught the flicker of doubt, the mask of cunning slipping to reveal the frightened child who once sought comfort during storms. What kind of mother had she become to drag her daughter into such a sordid plan? Before she could dwell, Grayson's hands circled her waist. "No cold feet now," he murmured. "We're too close." "He's right," Amara interjected quickly, pulling out her phone. "Let's just get it done." The enormity of what they were doing struck Scarlett like a blow. Her daughter was about to document her fake seduction of a man barely older than Amara herself. Yet retreat wasn't an option. The wheels were already in motion. "Fine," Scarlett said in a low voice, allowing Grayson to guide her to the couch. "Let's finish this." What followed was a carefully choreographed performance of intimacy. Clothes stayed on, but hands roamed provocatively, and every pose was calculated for maximum insinuation while maintaining plausible deniability. Amara's phone camera clicked incessantly. "These are perfect," she muttered, reviewing the shots. Then the sound of a key turning in the lock froze them all. The door swung open to reveal Brandon Nguyen, standing in the doorway with an expression of unnerving composure. "Well," he said quietly, stepping inside. "Isn't this cozy?" "Dad," Amara stammered, fumbling to hide her phone, but his piercing gaze had already landed on it. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Checking on my investment," he replied coolly. "The lease, to be precise. Wanted to make sure everything was in order." Grayson stiffened, trying to disentangle himself from Scarlett, but Brandon raised a hand. "Don't stop on my account," he said, his tone venomous. "You all look so comfortable." "Brandon," Scarlett began, but his glare silenced her instantly. "Save it," he snapped, his voice like frost. "I've heard everything, the whispers, the planted rumors, the staged charades. Did you honestly think I wouldn't see through it?" "Mr. Nguyen," Grayson ventured, his tone attempting professionalism. "I can explain." "Explain," Brandon cut him off with a cold laugh. "Explain why you're pawing my wife while my daughter photographs it? Explain your pathetic bid to blackmail your way into my firm? By all means, enlighten me." Amara stepped forward, her chin held high. "You pushed us to this. You left us to rot here." "Left you?" Brandon's voice cracked like a whip. "I gave you shelter, food, a chance to rebuild some dignity. And this is how you repay me? By plotting my downfall?" "This isn't what it looks like," Scarlett protested weakly. "Spare me," Brandon said, pulling out his phone. The room filled with their own damning words as he played back a recording of their scheme, captured with crystal clarity. "You bugged the apartment," Amara whispered, her face ashen. "Of course I did," Brandon replied icily. "Did you really think I'd leave myself vulnerable? That I wouldn't protect myself?" Turning to Grayson, he added, "Your law school's ethics board found your behavior enlightening. Your career just hit rock bottom." "You can't," Grayson began, but Brandon steamrolled him. "I already did, and I'm far from finished." He gestured toward Amara's phone. "Those photos? Uploaded to my cloud. Evidence of your pathetic extortion attempt." "Dad, please," Amara pleaded, her voice quivering. Brandon's expression was as hard as stone. "You've made your choices, just like your mother has. Now you'll face the consequences." As he turned to leave, he added with finality, "Oh, and one last thing. The lease expires tomorrow. Don't bother packing. You won't have anywhere to go." Scarlett's breath hitched as she fixed her gaze on him. "You can't just throw us out," she burst out. "Oh, but I can," he responded, his tone icy and implacable. "And in fact, I already have." His eyes swept over each of them, his expression unrelenting. "Consider this your final lesson on accountability. You gambled, and now you've lost." With a deliberate motion, he closed the door firmly behind him. The decisive click of the latch echoed in the heavy silence, leaving the two women alone amidst the wreckage of their failed ploy. Grayson moved first, snatching his jacket from the back of a chair. "This is on you," he hissed, turning on Amara with venom. "You swore he'd fold, that he'd do anything to avoid the fallout. Well, now my career's in ruins because of your brilliant idea." Amara's laughter was sharp, edged with hysteria. "Our fault? You were the one so eager to jump in. Don't even try to pin this on us." Grayson yanked the door open with a jerk. "I should have known better than to trust either of you." With that, he was gone, leaving Scarlett and Amara alone in the apartment they would soon be forced to vacate. Outside, the waning sunlight stretched long shadows across the floor, a grim reflection of the despair settling within. "Mom," Amara's voice cracked, her composure unraveling. "What do we do now?" Scarlett sank onto the couch, the very one she had recently used to stage damning photographs meant to destroy her husband's reputation. Now, those same images bore witness to their downfall. "I don't know," she muttered, the weight of their failure pressing down on her like a stone. Rain pelted the windows of Brandon Nguyen's corner office, each drop tapping in rhythm with his simmering anger. Spread out across his desk were surveillance photos, each one a snapshot of treachery. Scarlett intertwined with Grayson in carefully arranged poses, calculated but damning. Amara hovered in the background of many frames, her phone capturing every orchestrated moment. Every image was a testament to betrayal. The intercom buzzed, shattering the stillness. "Sir," his secretary's voice cut through the tension, "your daughter is here. She insists on seeing you." Brandon methodically stacked the photos into a neat pile. "Let her in." The door flew open, and Amara stormed in, clad in jeans and a plain sweater. The dark smudges under her eyes betrayed the toll of recent events, even as she tried to maintain a front of defiance. She marched to the desk, slamming her palms against it, scattering the photographs. "How could you?" she demanded. "Throwing us out like that!" "Sit," Brandon instructed, his tone devoid of sympathy. "No!" she snapped. You can't just bark orders. Sit down, he cut her off, his voice razor sharp, or I'll have security escort you out. Then we can discuss this through lawyers. Her defiance faltered, and she sank into the chair opposite him, though her glare remained fierce. We're already on the streets, she said bitterly. What more can you do to us? He leaned forward, his gaze unflinching. Would you like a detailed list of the legal consequences for attempted extortion? Or maybe a rundown of the penalties for conspiring to commit blackmail? Should I add the ethical disgrace of fabricating evidence to destroy someone's reputation? We didn't. Don't lie, he snapped, sliding a photo toward her. Not when the proof is right here. Not when I have recordings of your scheming. Amara's face went pale, her bravado slipping. How did you find out about the offshore account? She whispered. His smile was devoid of warmth. The one meant to stash the blackmail payout? I know everything, every sordid detail, every betrayal. Her voice quivered. Mom will fight this. She'll get a lawyer and demand alimony. Brandon chuckled, a hollow sound. With what funds? The credit cards are canceled, the accounts frozen, and no respectable law firm in this state would dare take her case against me. Professional courtesy. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but he recognized the manipulation beneath them. Daddy, please, we have nowhere else to go. You had a home, he replied, his tone unyielding, and you destroyed it. Actions have consequences, Amara, a lesson you and your mother have refused to learn. Scarlett barged into Brandon's office, her designer handbag clutched like a lifeline. Every hotel in town is suddenly refusing my credit cards, she fumed. Sit, Brandon said, his voice as cold as the rain streaking the windows. Let's get everything out in the open. Scarlett hesitated, her eyes darting to Amara. Bound by desperation, they sat, though the fractures in their unity were becoming more apparent. Outside, the storm intensified, a relentless symphony to their confrontation. I'm still your wife, Scarlett began, her voice rising. I have rights. Rights? Brandon's laughter was sharp and biting. Let's discuss my rights. The right not to be betrayed by my own wife and daughter. The right to protect myself from a family willing to destroy me for their greed. You cut us off, Amara interjected. You left us no choice. No choice? He repeated, incredulous. That apartment costs more per month than most families earn in a year. You had everything, shelter, food, luxury, but it was never enough, was it? You needed the designer clothes, the extravagant spa treatments, the endless indulgence. Scarlett's face twisted with anger. We needed dignity. Brandon's gaze hardened. Now you'll understand what dignity really means. You wanted to play your games. Well, they're over, and you've lost. You tore down the world we once knew, stripping us of the privileges that defined our lives. Now we're left to navigate existence as mere mortals. Scarlett's eyes blazed with anger as she confronted Brandon, her voice sharp with indignation. Mere mortals? Instead of parasites feeding off my hard work? How utterly heartbreaking for you, he retorted, his words coated in icy contempt. Amara leaned forward, her tone softening into the soothing cadence that had often diffused familial tensions. Dad, please, let's not make this worse. There has to be a way to resolve this. We can figure something out. Resolve it? Brandon's eyebrows arched as he picked up his phone. With a deliberate tap, he played an audio recording. The voices of his family filled the room. Mom, think about it, Amara's voice urged in the playback. Just one afternoon with Grayson. A few carefully staged photos and Dad won't have a choice. We'll get everything we want. Gossip won't cut it this time. We need something concrete, something he can't deny or explain away. These pictures will destroy him and force him to bargain. Brandon stopped the recording and turned to Amara, his expression hard as stone. Is that the kind of resolution you mean? Using your boyfriend to fabricate a scandal? Or coercing your mother to pose for these vile setups? What was this meant to accomplish beyond sheer devastation? It wasn't like that, Scarlett mumbled, her voice wavering. No? Brandon's voice grew sharper as he scattered photographs across his desk. Then enlighten me. Explain why my own daughter orchestrated these revolting charades. What outcome did you expect, other than utter destruction? Amara's voice cracked under the weight of her father's accusations. "We had no choice. You pushed us to this." "There is always a choice." Brandon's tone turned to steel. "And you both chose treachery, manipulation, and deceit. Now, you will choose how to face the consequences." "What consequences?" Scarlett's voice rose in defiance. "You've already taken everything from us." "Not quite everything," Brandon replied, pressing another button on his phone. "Send him in." The door opened, revealing a man impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. Scarlett's face turned ghostly pale. "Michael," she whispered. Michael, her former lover, shifted uncomfortably, his eyes avoiding hers. "I'm sorry, Scarlett," he said quietly, "but Mr. Nguyen made a very convincing case about my future here." "You're firing him?" Amara leaped from her chair. "Just because he was with Mom?" Brandon's smile was cold and unyielding. "Firing him? No. Michael has been remarkably helpful. Haven't you, Michael?" Michael's discomfort deepened. I told him everything," he admitted. "About Scarlett's other relationships, the plans she made, the things she said about you." Scarlett's expression twisted with rage and humiliation. "You snake!" she hissed, her fury aimed at both men. Michael's voice faltered but persisted. "And about the offshore accounts, the ones she created." Scarlett collapsed into a chair, her voice barely audible. "No, you didn't." "Oh, he did," Brandon confirmed, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. "Just as David told me about your plan to file for divorce once Amara turned 21, just as Thomas exposed your discussions about seizing half my assets, it seems all your accomplices found loyalty when their livelihoods were at stake." "You spied on me?" Scarlett's voice trembled with disbelief and fear. "I protected myself," Brandon replied curtly. "Just as I investigated you, Amara, the falsified credit card charges, the manipulation of your professors, the lies you spun to earn those glowing recommendations." Amara's face drained of color. "How did you find out?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been watching you both for months," Brandon said calmly, "collecting evidence, building my case. But we won't need a courtroom for this. You're going to sign these papers, silently, without argument." He slid 2 thick envelopes across the desk. Scarlett's hands trembled as she opened hers. "A divorce settlement?" she gasped, scanning the contents. "This is nothing. You're giving me nothing." "You're getting exactly what you deserve," Brandon said with finality. "A modest monthly stipend, contingent on your good behavior. No contact with my employees, no attempts to reconcile or renegotiate." Amara's voice cracked as she looked at her own set of papers. "You're cutting me off completely?" "Not entirely," Brandon said. "You'll have a small allowance, enough for basic needs, enough to share an apartment with your mother, enough for community college, but your Ivy League dreams, your trust fund, those disappeared the moment you betrayed me." "You can't do this," Scarlett protested weakly, though defeat laced her words. "It's all legal," Brandon assured her. "Isn't that right, Michael?" Michael nodded reluctantly. "The terms are binding. Fighting them will only make things worse." "Much worse," Brandon added, "for everyone involved, including young Grayson, whose law school ambitions are already precarious." Amara's head snapped up. "What did you do to him?" "Nothing he didn't bring on himself," Brandon said with chilling composure. "Just like all of you. Now what will you do?" Mother and daughter exchanged broken, tear-filled glances. Their confidence had been shattered. Outside, rain streaked the windows, echoing the tears streaming down Amara's face. This time her sorrow was genuine. The door opened again, and Grayson entered. His usual air of assurance had vanished, replaced by evident unease. His suit was rumpled, his posture unsure. "Tell them," Brandon commanded. "Tell them what you told me." Grayson avoided Amara's gaze, his voice heavy with regret. I'm sorry," he mumbled. "He knows everything." Amara's voice wavered. "What do you mean, everything?" "The truth," Brandon replied without mercy. "About your relationship with my daughter, about the schemes you concocted with her and her mother." Amara's laugh was brittle, teetering on hysteria. So you sold us out? Grayson shifted uncomfortably. At first it was real, but then you started plotting, talking about blackmail, and I couldn't risk my future. You betrayed us? Amara's voice cracked. He came to me weeks ago, Brandon interjected, right after your first attempt to take me down. The room plunged into silence, the air thick with the weight of their defeat. Brandon leaned back in his chair, his authority unquestioned. The battle was over. He had emerged victorious. Amara surged forward, her rage unmistakable as she fixed her glare on Grayson. You deceitful coward, she spat. Before she could reach him, Brandon's hand clamped down on her arm, firm and unyielding. Sit down, he ordered, his voice leaving no room for defiance. We're not finished here. Oh, but we are, Scarlett countered, her tone icy as she rose from her chair, trying to maintain her composure. Well done, Brandon. You've made your point. We'll sign your damned papers and scrape by on your miserable pittance. Brandon's gaze hardened, his voice steady but cutting. You still don't get it, do you? He released Amara, who sank back into her seat, visibly defeated. This isn't about the money. It's about accountability, about making you face the consequences of your actions. Scarlett's laughter was sharp and hollow. Consequences? You call this justice? You turned our allies against us, weaponized our relationships to destroy us. No, Brandon replied, his tone unwavering. I call it karma. He motioned to Grayson. Show them everything. With visibly trembling hands, Grayson unlocked his phone and opened a string of messages. These, he began hesitantly, are from last week. Amara's face drained of color as she scanned the texts. The messages laid bare her machinations, how she had planned to exploit her mother's affair with Grayson to disgrace both her parents, seize control of their wealth, and leave Scarlett destitute. Her betrayal was irrefutable. Scarlett broke the silence, her voice barely a whisper. You were going to betray me? Your own mother? Mom, please let me explain, Amara stammered, desperation in her voice. Don't, Scarlett interrupted, turning away as tears streaked her carefully applied makeup. I taught you too well, she said bitterly, her voice cracking with regret. Taught you to manipulate, to destroy, to see everyone as a pawn, like mother, like daughter. Brandon's voice was cold, cutting through the tension. You both schemed against each other, each convinced you were the smartest in the room, and neither of you realized you were being outplayed from the start. Grayson spoke softly, as though apologizing for his role. Everyone was in on it. Michael, David, Thomas. We all reported to Mr. Nguyen, every plot, every secret. Amara's tears spilled over as she demanded, Why? Why would you go this far? Why not just leave Mom? Brandon's expression didn't waver. Because you both needed to learn. Loyalty, the weight of betrayal, and its price. He spread his hands, indicating the room around them. And now you have. Your accomplices have abandoned you. Your closest confidants were feeding me information. This is justice. Shut up! Scarlett and Amara shouted in unison, the fragile alliance between them shattering under the weight of their mutual betrayals. Brandon gestured toward a stack of documents on the desk. Sign them. You can rebuild honest lives from nothing, or refuse, and I'll release everything. The evidence, the recordings, the photos. The world will see just how far you were willing to go. Scarlett's voice was strained. You wouldn't dare. Brandon's smile was grim. Try me. Mother and daughter exchanged a glance, their masks stripped away. For the first time, they saw each other as adversaries, rivals who would betray even family to serve their ambitions. Amara broke the silence. I'll sign, she said quietly, reaching for a pen. But I need to know one thing. You're in no position to demand anything, Brandon reminded her. Please, Amara implored, her eyes pleading. How long have you been planning this? Brandon's voice softened, though his resolve remained firm. Since I first caught your mother in a lie, since I saw you copying her methods, since I realized the two people I loved most would destroy me without hesitation. He turned to the window, gazing out at the rain-drenched city. I had to see how far you'd go, and you went farther than I ever imagined. The only sound in the room was the scratching of pens on paper and the quiet sobs of two women who had lost everything. Outside, the storm clouds began to part, the harsh sunlight illuminating the signed documents that sealed their fate. The game was over. The cost of betrayal had been paid in full. A month later, Scarlett stood in line at a budget grocery store, fumbling with a handful of crumpled bills. Her designer handbags were gone, replaced by a worn canvas tote. Her manicured nails were chipped, and gray roots peeked through her unkempt hair. "That'll be $43.27, the cashier said. Scarlett's hands were shaking as she counted out the last of the money. Behind her, someone sighed loudly, the kind of sound she used to make in expensive boutiques. "Here," said a familiar voice. Scarlett turned to see Maria, their former housekeeper, holding out two $20 bills, the same woman who had betrayed them to Brandon. "I don't need your handouts," Scarlett snapped, though her voice faltered. "It's not charity," Maria replied, her tone kind but firm. "Mr. Nguyen asked me to check on you, to make sure you're managing." Scarlett let out a bitter laugh. "Still spying on me for him?" "Still caring," Maria corrected, placing the money on the counter. "He wants to know you're learning, growing, changing." "Tell him to go to hell," Scarlett muttered, but she didn't stop the cashier from accepting Maria's money. Nor did she resist when Maria helped her carry her groceries to the bus stop. As they waited, Maria asked gently, "How's Amara?" Scarlett's face tightened. "Part-time at a coffee shop, community college. We don't speak often." "The betrayal stings, doesn't it?" Maria's voice held no judgment. "Knowing your own daughter plotted against you?" Scarlett's reply was barely audible. "Like mother, like daughter. I taught her too well. I showed her how to use people, to think love was just leverage." As the bus pulled up, Maria placed a hand on Scarlett's arm. "It's not too late to change, to become someone worthy of trust." Scarlett narrowed her eyes. "Why do you care?" Maria's expression was serene. "Because Mr. Nguyen cares. Even now, after everything, he hopes you'll find your way back to decency. Not for him, but for yourself." Across town, Amara scrubbed down tables in a bustling coffee shop, her once chic wardrobe replaced by a plain black uniform. Her carefully styled hair was now tied back in a simple ponytail. Snippets of conversation drifted from a nearby group of businessmen. "Did you hear about the Nguyen case?" one man asked. "Yeah," his companion replied. "His wife and daughter tried to frame him. Elaborate scheme. They lost everything." "Serves them right," the first man said. "Brandon Nguyen's one of the best lawyers in the state. Can you believe his own family turned on him?" Amara's hands trembled as she cleared their table. Her punishment wasn't just poverty. It was knowing the world saw her for what she truly was. The sting wasn't only in the poverty or the shattered prospects. It was in the shame of overhearing strangers dissect her family's failures and scandals, oblivious to her presence. A man in an impeccably tailored suit interrupted her thoughts, holding out an empty sugar packet. "Miss, could you bring me another?" he asked, his tone brisk. She nodded, unwilling to trust her voice to respond. There had been a time when she might have seen this as an opening, a chance to charm a man of means, an opportunity to exploit. Now, it only left her feeling empty, drained of any ambition to try. The jingle of the cafe's doorbell pulled her gaze instinctively to the entrance. Grayson walked in, surrounded by a cluster of confident law students. Her chest constricted as he passed by without a glance in her direction. Of course. He'd taken what he needed from her, a junior position at her father's law firm, secured by exposing the schemes she and her mother had orchestrated. "Taking your break?" her manager called from the counter, her tone brisk but not unkind. "Someone's asking for you in the office." Amara's legs felt like lead as she trudged to the cramped back room. Reaching the doorway, she stopped abruptly, her breath catching in her throat. "Dad," she murmured. Brandon Nguyen stood by the window, his suit pristine and expensive as always. "Hello, Amara," he greeted her. Her voice was brittle with weariness. "Here to rub it in?" she asked. "No," he replied evenly, turning to face her fully. "I'm here to see if you're learning." She sank into the room's only chair, her exhaustion palpable. Learning what? She shot back. What it's like to be stabbed in the back by people you trusted? How far you can fall when everything crumbles? No, he said firmly. Learning what it costs to treat others like pawns. Learning the weight of building a life on deception and manipulation. Her laughter was bitter, her voice raw. I learned from you and Mom, she retorted. You two were the experts. His tone cut through her like a blade. Your mother taught you how to manipulate. I taught you the importance of integrity, accountability, and effort. You chose which lessons to follow. Tears welled in her eyes as her defenses crumbled. Why are you here? She asked softly. What do you want from me? His expression softened, a flicker of pain crossing his face. Because you're still my daughter, he said, his voice tinged with sorrow. Because despite everything, I want more for you than the path your mother set you on. She shook her head, her voice hollow. It's too late. I've lost everything, my future, my friends, even her. What you've lost, he countered, you never truly earned. Now you have the opportunity to build something genuine, something grounded in truth and effort, not in schemes and lies. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why do you still care? After all we did to you? His gaze met hers, unwavering. Because love isn't a transaction, Amara. It's not the conditional affection your mother turned into currency. Real love is wanting better for someone, even when they've hurt you, even when they don't deserve it. As he moved to leave, he paused at the door. Your college fund isn't gone, he said. It's in trust, waiting, not for the elite schools you used to dream about, but for when you're ready to use it to grow, not to manipulate. Her voice wavered. How will you know if I've changed? He turned back to meet her gaze one last time. I'll know. The real question is, will you? When he left, Amara remained in the small office, her thoughts churning. The muted hum of the cafe buzzed on the other side of the door. Her mind drifted to her mother, likely plotting her next move somewhere across town, still ensnared in a worldview where relationships were games to win. She thought of Grayson, who had outplayed her and her mother, turning their own strategies against them. And finally, she thought of her father, who had orchestrated their downfall not out of spite, but in the desperate hope that they might change. The sound of her manager calling her name broke through her reverie. Tables waited to be cleared, customers to be served. Honest work, the kind she had once dismissed as beneath her. Straightening her uniform, she stepped back into the bustling cafe. Across town, Brandon Nguyen sat alone in his office, gazing at an old family photograph. After a moment, he slipped it into a desk drawer and turned the key. He knew some bridges could never be rebuilt, some betrayals too deep for forgiveness. But perhaps, he hoped, something new might rise from the ashes, not trust, not reconciliation, but growth, understanding. The price of betrayal had been paid. What came next was up to them all. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.